Hey guys, welcome back to another web development basics tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to be talking about creating a basic layout with HTML and CSS. So basically we're just going to be using the CSS grid to create a basic layout that is actually like really useful. But yeah, so we're going to be using the knowledge of our HTML and CSS videos in the previous videos. Not too much because it's quite basic still, but yeah, you should probably watch those first. So anyways, I'm just going to create a HTML, and then I'm actually not going to create a CSS file, because what you can do instead of creating a CSS file, if your thing is quite small, you can actually just put style in here, and then this can act like your CSS file. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is, first of all, open up the web page here. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the grid. So how the grid works is you give a div element. So if we have a div here, and then we have to give it an ID so we can reference it. Let's just call it something like demo grid. And basically what you do is you make this grid fill up the entire page, and then you actually give it a grid layout. So what you can do is, if I inspect the element right now, we should see that we actually have our div, but you can't see anything because there's nothing in it, and also we haven't set any explicit height and width. So let's set that first. So I'm actually going to make this a bit smaller just so we can see more of the actual screen. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go over to here and go to our style and actually reference this grid. So hashtag demo grid. Oh, not grod. Okay, demo grid, and then first thing you want to do is actually explicitly set it to take up the entire screen. So to do that, what you want to do is you just want to set it to be height 100 view height and width 100 view width. You can do 100%, but sometimes that doesn't work. So once you do that, you should see that you actually have some scroll bars, and that's because of the padding on the body. And I'll talk more about that in a later video, but for now we're just going to disable it. So you can go to here, call the body, and then just set padding to 0. Okay, and now you should see these scroll bars disappear, unless I have to set 0 pixels. And I think we also might have to set the margin to 0 pixels as well. Okay, yeah, there we go. So now once we have our grid filling up the entire screen, it's time for us to add our grid. So to set a display to grid, we just have to set display grid like that. And then what you do is we actually have to specify our columns and rows. So for our grid, we're just going to have a 3x3 grid, kind of like a tic-tac-toe grid. So if you do grid template columns, and then you can just type something like 33%, 33%, and 33%. And if we do grid template rows, we'll do the same thing, 33%, 33%, and 33%. And if we run this, and then you should see, if you're running this on like a decent browser, that a little grid button pops up, and if you click that, you can see that we actually get our grid. So one problem you might notice straight away is that our grid actually has this border, and that's because we've set it to 33% instead of 33.3% like it should be. So what we can do is we can actually use the fractional unit, which is basically just going to be, if we do one of these, is going to take up 100% of the screen. Two of these is each one's going to take up 50%, and three of these, each one's going to be 33%. And we can actually do that. So now it's going to be 1, 2, 1. So there's 4 of them in total. Each one's going to take 25%. So this one will be 25, this will be 50, and this one will be 25. And to see that in action, if we just run this, you can see that this one is double as large as these two. But that is not what we want. We actually want it to be equal on all. So I'll just do the exact same thing on the rows, and now you should see that we actually have a perfect grid like this. So the next thing you might be wondering is how to populate these grids. Well, that's actually even easier. So to populate these grids, you basically just have to create another division inside of those, and then you can actually just put stuff inside. So let's say this was our first division. Since this is the first grid we put, it's going to be in this row, and it goes rows first and then goes down the columns. So this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then let's just say this is inside the first grid. and if we show the grid again, you should be able to see that. You can actually see it, and if you just keep repeating this, like you can basically just keep repeating this like until you fill up the entire grid, second and third, and you can see that it's going along this. So yeah, I might CSS grid is actually like has a lot of features, so I might make an entire video on it, but the last thing I'm going to show you guys is actually how to add a border to each one of your grid cells. So what you want to do is, you might think that inside of each of these divs, I'm just going to delete all of these, and then what I'm going to do is actually just create one div and give it a special class called something like class equals grid child, and then we can reference this class inside of here, and let's just give this a background color of red so you can see it. Okay, so one option you might be thinking is you can just set the border to this 1px solid black, and then I'll just copy and paste this 9 times. How many times is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So now you could see that that has worked, but one thing you'll actually notice is if we zoom this grid out, so let's actually make this 0.9 fr, just so we can see the end of it. Oh, actually no, I'm just gonna make it 5. Okay, so now one thing you'll notice is that this edge is actually a lot thinner than all these other edges, and that's because this edge has actually been only had a border applied to it once, whereas all of these have had the border applied to them 2 times. So if you think about it, this one has a border, and then this one has another border, and this line is sharing a border between them, so it actually has the border applied twice. So if you don't want that, which you probably don't, there's actually another way of fixing it. So what you can do is actually only make this display the right and bottom borders. So if we do border right and then set that to this, and then do the same thing for the bottom border like that, and now you should see that that's fixed. And then one issue you might have is that if your grid doesn't take up the whole screen like this, then the bit over here will actually be missing. So to fix that, you just have to add in a border top and border left over here. You can't actually see it, but it's actually there, and you see it's actually given us a scroll bar because it's trying to show the entire thing, but it can't because we've already set it to take the entire screen. So yeah, I could just comment these out, but I'll show you one last thing. You can actually use the calc function, which is basically just enables you to do calculations in here. So we want 100 view height minus 1 pixel, or it might be 2, so let's just try that. So if we do 100 view height and 100 view width minus 1, and oh, what have I done? I think it's minus 1 pixels. There we go. So yeah, basically we've just compensated the extra pixels at the bottom by only by setting the height to 100 view height minus 1 pixels. So yeah, that was basically a quick overview of CSS grid, and then inside of these you just populate every grid by having items inside, like for this one, some data. You can see that appears over there. But yeah, I'll probably make an entire video on CSS grid later because it's quite complicated, but this was just a basic layout, and we used our HTML and CSS skills. So yeah, and then in the next tutorial I'm going to be talking about the box layout, which is probably even more important. So yeah, make sure you watch that. See you guys in a future tutorial. Bye.